Alright guys, Phyrexia All-Be-One is here and it's bringing a ton new cards which I think will change the standard format quite a bit. Now the standard format has been quite stale from the release of Brothers War. There tends to be a lot of, black heavy decks around, Grixis mid-range, Mardu mid-range, of course mono black, but then you also had some other decks as well like mono white that's kind of been going up the ranks as well throughout standard. However, Phyrexia All-Be-One is bringing some really cool cards to the format and it's going to bring a bunch of new archetypes. So in this video we'll be going through 5 of them right now, breaking down each one and all the new cards from the new set and how they're going to feature. First off we have Toxic, mainly white and green. Now green hasn't really seen much play, to be honest, in the standard format of recent. It's kind of been pushed away, but I think it's coming back pretty strong with the release of Phyrexia. So Toxic is a new mechanic that's coming into Phyrexia All-Be-One, and it appears on creature cards throughout various different colours of the colour pie within this set. Toxic appears with a number on creature cards, and Toxic is whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, they also get a poison counter. So they'll deal the regular damage, and then they will deal the number of poison counters equal to the number on Toxic. Really strong. And in the past we had Infect, which was whenever the creature dealt damage in the form of that many poison counters, whereas Toxic is more of a fixed, kind of poison counter Infect style. And it is pretty good. It means you can deal damage and also you have an alternative way of giving your opponent poison counters. Now if the opponent has 10 or more poison counters, they lose the game. There's no way of removing those poison counters. It's going to be really tough if your opponent's racking up all these poison counters for you to win the game. Let's take a look at some of the cards that could be featured in the Toxic deck. First off we have Skrelv, Defector Might. It is 1 white for a 1/1. It is a legendary artifact creature, Friction Might with Toxic 1, and it can't block, so that's not too bad. And then you can pay 1 Friction white mana, which is either 1 white mana or 2 life. Then you can tap it, choose a colour, another target creature you control gains Toxic 1 and hexproof from the colour until the end of turn. It can't be blocked by creatures of that colour this turn. This is an incredible 1-drop. Being able to protect your creatures and also make it so that your creatures can get through blockers is incredibly strong, and it has Toxic itself, which is really useful. You're not too bothered about the fact that it can't block. This is a great 1-drop. Even though it is a legendary, you could probably play multiple copies of this card. Really good for this style of deck. We have Slaughter Singer, which is a green white for a 2/2 with Toxic 2. Whenever another creature you control with Toxic attacks, it gets +1/+1 until the end of turn. For the ability to have Toxic 2 on a 2-drop is very strong, and it buffs them all, so they can actually deal normal damage as well. Incredibly strong, and it fits the curve perfectly with this deck. There are some great 2-drops coming, but this is definitely one of them. Just having Toxic 2 is quite hard to find a lot of creatures that are coming out in this set, so having it on a 2-drop is really good. Then we have Bloated Contaminator, 2 colorless 1 green for a 4/4 trample and Toxic 1 with whenever Bloated Contaminator deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. This is an incredible 3-drop. The fact is that you get a 4/4 trampler for 3 mana is already really good, but the fact is it has Toxic 1 and you can proliferate. When you proliferate, it basically means that you can choose to increase any number of counters on any number of target permanents or players, which means you can give them another poison counter. It also means that if you have ways to put counters on your creatures, you can make them even bigger, especially if they have +1/+1 counters. So this is a really good 3-drop for any aggressive deck that has Toxic or just green decks in general. Then we have an incredible 1-drop, and that is the Venerated Rot Priest, 1 green for a 1/2 with Toxic 1. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. This is an insane 1-drop to go really well with Skrelv. Now this is a good, just aggressive creature. Now this is just a great 1-drop to get on the board as quick as possible. However, it's pretty good if you just draw it mid to late game as well, because it also means that if someone wants to remove all your creatures, they start getting poison counters. That can add up really quickly, especially when they start, go for the Throw or Infernal Grasp or Cut Down or anything like that. They're going to start taking a ton of poison counters, so you kind of have to deal with this guy straight away. So really good 1-drop for this deck. Then we have a 2-mana enchantment. This is a very strong enchantment, and that is Skrelv's Hive. 1 colorless 1 white enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and you create a 1/1 colorless Friction Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. And then the card also has Corrupted. As long as the opponent has 3 or more poison counters, creature control with Toxic have lifelink. This is a really good 2-drop. So if you start off turn 1, Venerated Rot Priest, then you play Skrelv's Hive, this is going to get crazy. You're going to start making loads of tokens. And the loss of life isn't too bad. You're getting lots of 1/1s. They can't block, however, so that is a bit of a downside. But then they can start gaining lifelink once your opponent has 3 or more poison counters. And that can start, help offset the life loss as well. Very strong 2-drop. Late game, it's okay. This is a great card to come back after a board wiper, so this is actually a pretty good enchantment for 2 mana. Next we have a big dinosaur, and that is the Tyrannix Rex, which is 4 colorless, triple green for an 8/8, can't be countered, trample, ward 4, haste, and toxic 4. This is a big boy, okay? This is a really big boy. This is the top end of your deck. Now, I wouldn't play too many copies of this. Kind of low to the ground with this style of deck, but you want a big finisher. And this card really is a finisher. Really tough to remove. Can't be countered, which is very relevant. Ward 4 is expensive to try and shift this card. You know, they want to go for the throw it. That's going to cost them 6 mana. That's quite, you know, quite expensive. Although at 7 mana, they probably got the mana to do that. So you got to be careful with that, of course. And then Toxic 4 is amazing. You know, it's a big threat, 8/8. Left unchecked, it's going to deal a ton of damage. So it's really good. The fact that it has trample as well, and it's a big creature, if they block over 1/1, they're still taking 4 poison counters. Very, very good in the top end. And then next we have a couple of cards which are kind of a little bit of a support cards. We have a Mondrak Glory Dominus, which is 2 colors white for a 4/4 legendary creature friction horror. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, create twice that many tokens instead. And then you can pay 1 colorless and then double friction white, sacrifice 2 other artifacts and or creatures, put an indestructible counter on it. Just double all the time. You're making more and more of these tokens, and it's really easy to make it indestructible. Very, very strong. And a 4/4 for 4 is not bad either. So this could be another mid-range top-end card of this deck to really just amplify all of these friction mites that you're creating. And then finally we have the Seed Core, which is a land. It's a land sphere. It taps for 1 colorless, and you can tap it and add any mana of any color. It can only be used to cast friction creature spells, but it has corrupted, so you can tap it and you can give a 1/1 creature +2/+1 until the end of the turn, and you can only activate this if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, so at least 1 might is attacking as a 3/2, and that is really, really good. You know, we used to have old cards in the past like Pendelhaven, which used to be quite similar, but this is really good for this style of deck. Another archetype for this format is Boros Equipment. Now this is going to be a deck where you play lots of small creatures. You'll be playing the new equipment cards which bring tokens into play, equipped with those equipment, and just smash face. So it's going to be a really good aggressive deck. It's nice to see a Boros artifact equipment deck coming into the format. So let's take a look at the cards that will be in this deck. First off, we have Dragon Wing Glider. It is 3 colorless, red for a equipment card, and it has the mechanic for Mirrodin. When this equipment enters the battlefield, create 2/2 red rebel creature token, then attach this to this. Now that is really good. It gives you a threat straight away, and it is the mechanic in this set for Mirrodin. You can be making a ton of tokens and attaching this equipment to these tokens. And for this artifact, they get +2/+2 flying and haste. So for 5 mana, you're getting basically a 4/4 with flying and haste. That's not bad going. We've seen plenty of dragons have this. Then it has equip 5, so if you want to, next turn you can play 5 mana and equip this to another creature to give it +2/+2 flying and haste, which is pretty good. We used to see this in the past with Living Weapon, but now we have it for Mirrodin. And then we have Jor Kadeen, first Gold Warden, which is red-white 2/2 with trample, legendary creature human rebel. When it attacks, it gets +X until the end of turn, where X is the number of equipped creatures you control. Then if his power is 4 or greater, you draw a card. This is a really, really good threat for 2 mana, and it's got trample as well. You can buff him up, start putting equipment on all your creatures, and then you're going to start drawing cards once he gets big, which is quite quick and easy to do with this style of deck. So it's a really good 2-drop to get on the aggressive, and card drawing red-white is hard to come by, so it's nice to get it. Then we have another equipment card, which is Blade Hold War Whip, 1 colorless, 1 red, 1 white for an equipment. It also has 4 Mirrodin, so it comes into play with a 2/2 rebel. You attach equipment to it. The equipped creature has double strike, so you get a 3 mana 2/2 double strike, which is pretty good. And then it also has equipped abilities you activate if other equipment costs 1 less to activate, which is very, very relevant indeed. And then it costs 5 itself to equip. Not too bad, you know, not a bad equipment card. 3 mana 2/2 double strike, that can be quite aggressive, and as soon as you start equipping this to other creatures to give them double strike, things can, you know, get ahead real quickly. So this is a good little 3-drop to get some threats on the board quick. Then we have a really cool 1-drop, and that is the Cacophony Scamp. It is a 1 red 1/1. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice it. If you do, proliferate. But then it also has, when it dies, it deals its damage equal to its power to any target. This is incredible. You attach loads of equipment onto this little guy, you start hitting them, it's a threat they have to deal with, and at any time when you do combat damage to them, you can sacrifice him, but if they kill it, it's going to be dealing damage elsewhere. Whether it be kill a creature, whether or not it's killing a planeswalker, whether or not it kills them. Either way, a really good little 1-drop if you can start putting cheap equipment onto this guy. Then we have the new addition to the swords, and that is the Sword of Forge and Frontier. Now I actually really rate this sword, especially for standard. It is 3 colorless to play, 2 to equip. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from red and from green, which is very strong. Then whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn, and you can play an additional land this turn. This is very strong in a red-white deck. It kind of gives you some form of card advantage by exiling the cards in your library to try and, you know, play some more cards that turn, but it also allows you to ramp. This is actually a really good effect to have in a deck that doesn't really play green, so this can be really useful, and especially if one of those cards you exile as a land, it's really, really good. So I think this is very good. Protection from red and green is very relevant, probably more the red, more so than the green, but with the release of all these toxic creatures, green, you know, having protection from green can be really useful, but the red is incredibly useful, especially with dealing with cards like Burn Down the House and Obliterate and Bolt, which may, you know, deal with your creatures. This is going to be a really good one moving forward. Also, you know, protects you from other cards like Lightning Strike, so really, really good card to give to your creatures. Then we have a really good removal spell with Rebel Salvo. 2 colors, 1 red instant, has affinity for equipment, so it costs 1 color less for each equipment you control, and it deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. That permanent loses indestructible until end of turn. This is a very good removal spell only because of Shieldred. Shieldred is a 5 toughness creature that is quite tough to deal with in the standard format right now, and even for 3 mana that is pretty good. But if you have 2 equipment out, you're only paying 1, it's instant. Being able to deal with planeswalkers is extremely relevant as well, and losing indestructible, really good with all these like friction gods that are going around that could be, you know, seeing play in the new standard format. Then we have a awesome legendary creature in Kemba, Car Enduring. 1 colorless, 1 white for a legendary creature cat cleric. It's a 2/2. Whenever itself or another cat enters the battlefield under your control, you can attach an equipment you control to that creature, and equipped creatures you control get +1/+1, and then you can pay 5 mana to create a 2/2 cat creature token. Again, this is a really, really good 2-drop that works really well with equipment, and being able to attach equipment you control straight away to it is very strong. You take that Dragon Glider, all of a sudden Kemba gets +2/+2 fly and haste, and then it gets an additional +1 because it's equipped. Then all of a sudden you have a 5/5 flying haste, which is very, very strong. So yeah, this is a really, really good 2-drop to have, and late game is very strong because you can just put mana into making 2/2s. And then to finish it off, we have a new planeswalker, and that is Nahiri the Unforgiving. 1 colorless, 1 red, 1 white, and 1 friction red or white. Comes into play with 5 loyalty counters. It is completed, of course, and you can +1 until your next turn up to 1 target creature attacks a player each combat if able, so it forces them to attack. +1 discard a card, draw a card, give you some form of advantage, and then it has a 0, which is exile target creature or equipment card with mana value less than Nahiri's loyalty from your graveyard. You create a token, there's a copy of it, then that token gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So this is really good at bringing a creature back from the graveyard to give you some little bit of graveyard recursion, but you can also do it with equipment. The fact is you can do it with equipment, especially with the 4 Mirrodin ones. That could be quite useful, and that could throw your opponent off guard, especially if you bring back these equipment and it immediately attaches to a rebel, and then you just start, you know, kind of going crazy. So really, really good overall for Nahiri. The next archetype we have, I'm kind of looking forward to, and that is Dimir or Blue-Black Proliferate Control. The aim of this deck is to try to control the game, kill your opponent's creatures, draw a bunch of cards, and just proliferate like crazy. Ideally your planeswalkers, or maybe even some poison counters, but mainly your planeswalkers. Close to, well, myself, and that is Jace the Perfected Mind. 2 colorless, 1 blue, and 1 blue Phyrexian. Comes into play with 5 loyalty counters. It is completed, of course, and it has +1 until your next turn up to 1 target creature gets -3/-0. Very good, it can protect itself. Then -2, target player mills 3 cards. If a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, you may draw 3 cards, otherwise you draw a card. This is incredibly powerful. Milling your opponent is not that strong, but being able to draw cards, especially in the mid to late game drawing 3 cards, is very strong indeed. And then -X, target player mills 3 times X cards. So this is a really good planeswalker. It comes down really early, it can come down as turn 3. If you're on the play, it can protect itself as it's +1. And it really works extremely well in multiples. You imagine you play Jace on turn 3, you tick up, it protects itself. Then in the following turn, you can do its -6, mill 18 cards, play another Jace, and then you can start milling more cards and drawing 3 cards at a time. That is incredibly strong. So this is a really good planeswalker to have in this style of deck. Next we have Voidwing Hybrid. Blue-black, it's a 2/1 Phyrexian bat. It flies and has Toxic 1. Whenever you proliferate, return Voidwing Hybrid from your graveyard to your hand. This is a great little 2-drop. good flyer, 2-1 blocker, pretty good, but it's also evasive and it can deal damage in the form of poison counters. So you give him a poison counter, you start proliferating, really strong. Then we have Venser Corpse Puppet, a great 2-drop, 1/3 Friction Zombie Wizard, legendary creature. It's got lifelink and also toxic 1. Whenever you proliferate, you can choose one. If you don't control a creature named the Hollow Sentinel, create the Hollow Sentinel, a legendary 3/3 colorless Friction Golem artifact creature token, and or you can give target artifact creature you control flying and lifelink until the end of turn. This is a great little 2-drop, has toxic, has lifelink, 1/3 body, pretty relevant, good blocker, and also it can then start making tokens, which is quite relevant, and making it fly and give it lifelink is also very strong. Then we have a removal spell, Drown in Ichor, 1 colorless, 1 black. Target creature gets -4/-4 until the end of turn, proliferate. This is a really good removal spell, quite cheap. Sorcery is a bit of a downside, and also it doesn't deal with cards like Shieldred, which can be an issue, but still not a bad little 2-drop removal. Next we have a Scheming Aspirant, which is a 2-drop, 1 colorless, 1 black for a 1/3. Whenever you proliferate, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This is a really good creature, allows you to drain your opponent, and again a pretty good blocker for a 2-drop. Then we have another Planeswalker in Vraska Betrayal's Sting, 4 colorless, 1 black, 1 Friction black, starts with 6 loyalty, 0. You draw a card and you lose 1 life, proliferate. Card draw ability there, the -2 target creature becomes an artifact creature, add 1 color of any mana, and it loses all other abilities and card type. This is really good, basically turns an opponent's creature into a treasure token. The -9, if a player has fewer than 9 poison counters, they get a number of poison counters equal to the difference. This is a very strong ability that can close the game out incredibly fast. Then we have a blue artifact called Ichor Gauntlet, 2 colorless, 1 blue artifact. Planeswalkers you control have 0 proliferate and have -12, take an extra turn after this one. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose a counter on target permanent, put an additional counter on that kind of permanent. That is very strong, being able to have your Planeswalker have the ability to proliferate, but not only that, give your Planeswalkers an ability for you to take an extra turn after this one. And then to finish it off, we have a great legendary creature in Tukathal, Enquiry Dominus, 2 colorless, blue for a 3/5 flyer. Is one of these god cards. If you would proliferate twice instead, and then you can pay 1 colorless and double friction blue, remove 3 counters from among other artifact creatures and planeswalkers you control, put an indestructible counter on it. Very good 4-drop there, 3/5 flyer. It can become indestructible and allows you to proliferate twice. Next we have Oil Counters Sacrifice. This is an artifact deck based around creating a ton of little artifacts that likes to be sacrificed and put oil counters on a variety of different permanents. This can actually go quite well with a lot of cards that already exist in the standard format around red-black sacrifice. So first off, we have Vat of Rebirth, 1 black for an artifact. Whenever another artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on Vat of Rebirth. Then you can pay 3 mana, 2 colors, 1 black, tap, remove 4 oil counters from Vat of Rebirth, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. Great recursion right there and uses oil counters to great effect. Then we have Vindictive Flamestoker, 1 red, 1/2, Friction Wizard. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on Vindictive Flamestoker. Then you can pay 7 mana, sacrifice it, and then you can discard your hand, then draw 4 cards. This ability costs 1 colorless less for each oil counter on Vindictive Flamestoker. Great 1-drop, really makes use of all these cheap non-creature spells and allows you to refill your hand. Next up we have a great artifact card in Urabrask's Forge, 2 colorless, 1 red artifact. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put an oil counter on Urabrask's Forge, then create an X1 red friction horror creature token with trample and haste, where X is the number of oil counters on Urabrask's Forge. Sacrifice that token at the beginning of the next end step. This is great, you can start putting a ton of oil counters on this artifact, create this huge threat, and just put pressure on your opponent each and every turn. Then we have a legendary creature in Kethic Crucible Goliath, 2 colorless, red black for a 4/4, so pretty good for 4 mana, 4/4 for 4. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary creature card with lesser mana value and then put it onto the battlefield. Then put the rest of the cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is great. A 4 mana 4/4 body is pretty good, and the fact is you can kind of get some great little advantage out of sacrificing creatures to then get some more good value out of smaller creatures from the rest of your deck, so pretty decent. Next up we have Charge Forger, 1 colorless, 1 black, 1 red for a 2/3 friction beast. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 red friction goblin creature token. Then whenever another token or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you can put an oil counter onto it. Then you can remove 3 oil counters, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. So you get a pretty decent body. You get two bodies, 2/3 and a 1/1 when it comes into play for 3. Not too bad. And then you can start putting oil counters onto it to then start getting some card advantage from the top of your library. Pretty good. Uses oil counters to its advantage pretty well there. Next we have a legendary creature called Vrun Executioner Thane, 1 colorless 1 black for a 2/2 legendary creature Phyrexia Vampire. Whenever one or more other creatures you control dies, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This ability triggers only once each turn. So not the best creature, not the best stats either. 2 mana 2/2, it's okay, but it can start draining your opponent when you start losing these small little creatures. Next up we have a big creature, and that is the Archfiend of the Dross. It is 2 colorless black black for a 6/6 flyer, which is very good stats. Enters the battlefield with 4 oil counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove an oil counter from it, and then if it has no oil counters left on it, you lose the game. Whenever a creature an opponent control dies, its controller loses 2 life. This is a huge threat. Now, the loss of the game by losing oil counters can be negated by putting more oil counters onto it, or just killing it and sacrificing it before it runs out of oil counters. And to finish off this archetype, we have Drivnod, the Carnage Dominus. This is one of the black gods. 3 colorless black black for a 8/3, big stats there. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of opponent you control to trigger, it triggers an additional time, and then you can play 2 friction black, exile 3 creature cards from your graveyard, put an indestructible counter on it. Very, very good creature. Great top end, big stats. 8/3 is huge, very aggressive. You can make it indestructible pretty easy, and having all of your triggered abilities trigger twice when stuff dies is incredibly strong with this deck. And the final archetype we're going to talk about today is mono green. We're going to go with a monocolored deck. Green could make a comeback in this set. Let's take a look. First off, we have Evolving Adaptive. 1 green for a 0/0 Friction Warrior. It enters the battlefield with an oil counter, and it gets +1/+1 for each oil counter on it. Then whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than Evolving Adaptive, you can put an oil counter on it. This is a great 1-drop. It can get bigger and bigger and bigger pretty quickly. If you can get this down on turn 1, this thing can be pretty huge. Not a great top deck, but early game, this can get big very, very fast, especially when you start playing bigger creatures. Then we have Canker Bloom, which is 1 colorless 1 green for a 3/2 Friction Fungus. You can pay 1 mana, sacrifice it to choose 1. Destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or proliferate. Now, we've already seen the Werewolf Outland Liberator already be used quite a bit in Standard, and I think this is going to be a very, very good replacement. This is, in fact, in my opinion, better, because the ability to proliferate is quite relevant and has a little bit more of an extra power. This is going to be a really, really good card in Standard. Next, we have Green Sun's Twilight. X colorless and green sorcery. Reveal the top X+1 cards of your library. Choose a creature and or a land card from among them and put those cards into your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. But if X is 5 or more, you can instead put those cards onto the battlefield or into your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. This is a great card advantage spell, being able to just put a lot of mana into this and then just put creatures into your hand and land in your hand, or just put them into play. This is a really, really good card that kind of scales quite well as the game progresses. So this is a great mid to late game card for this style of deck. Next, we have a great mana accelerant in Armored Scrapgorger. 1 colorless 1 green for a 0/3 Friction Beast. It gets +3/+0 as long as it has 3 or more oil counters on it, and it can tap for any color of mana. When it becomes tapped, exile target card from a graveyard and put an oil counter on it. This is a great mana accelerant for 2 mana. Not only is it a good blocker, but it can also interact with your opponent's graveyard. That is incredibly strong, especially in mono green. So this is a great little 2-drop to accelerate you into your big threats. Speaking of big threats, we then have Bloated Contaminator, as we saw this in the Toxic deck. 2 colorless, 1 green for a 4/4, trample, Toxic 1, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. This is just a big beater. You know, in this style of deck, you would play as just a 3 mana 4/4 trample, very, very strong. Toxic can come into play a little bit, but not a huge amount, but mainly it is that 3 mana 4/4 body, just hitting your opponent hard. Next, we got the legendary troll himself, Thrun, Breaker of Silence. 3 colorless, green for a 5/5 legendary creature, Troll Shaman. He can't be countered, he has trample, and he can't be the target of non-green spells your opponents control or abilities from non-green sources your opponents control, and as long as it's your turn, Thrun has indestructible. This is just a big creature. A 5 mana 5/5 with trample. It can't be countered, can't really be targeted, and it has indestructible on your turn. He is dealing the damage. He is getting in there. He's rumbling with the best. Now, him not having indestructible on your opponent's turn can be a bit of an issue. So he's kind of an aggressive style creature that wants to get in there and deal a ton of damage. Next up, we have the Evolved SWINDON. 2 colorless, green for a 5/5. It enters the battlefield with 4 oil counters on it, and it has trample as long as it has 2 or fewer oil counters on it. Otherwise, it has hexproof. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove an oil counter from Evolved SWINDON. If it has no oil counters on it, sacrifice it. This is a big creature. A 4 mana 5/5, has hexproof, and then eventually has trample. This guy is a beat stick. Really, really good. Works incredibly well. The fact you can go 3-drop, Bloated Contaminator, 4-drop, this guy, 5-drop, Thrun. Oh, very, very strong. Speaking of strong, we have Nissa Ascended Animist, 3 colorless green and 2 friction green for 7 loyalty planeswalker. +1, you create XX green friction horror creature token where X is Nissa's loyalty. So straight off the bat, you get an 8/8, which is very, very strong. Obviously, it'll go down over time when she starts losing loyalty. -1, destroy target artifact or enchantment. There's a ton of those around. And then -7 until the end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 for each forest you control and gain trample. That is a powerhouse end game ending effect. Literally comes down, she can make a ton of tokens, or she can just, you know, destroy an artifact or enchantment, or just literally just be this massive game ending pump spell for all of your creatures. Very, very strong top end. So there you have it, guys. Those are 5 examples of different archetypes and the new cards that could fit in those archetypes in the new standard. Obviously, I'm going to be building a ton of different decks to try out. I'm definitely going to be putting together one of each of these decks and trying them myself. And there's a ton of cards that already exist in the standard format that will work really well with these archetypes. And of course, there's already existing archetypes which are probably going to get even stronger moving into the new standard format. Mono white I expect to be very strong. Mono black I expect to be very strong. So those are the type of decks that kind of will stand around and get stronger with these new cards. There you have it, guys. If you made it far into the video, make sure to smash that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more Magic content. And that's it from me, guys, in this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.